Sangsi's group only uses sensor suits. Yesterday I reported on protests in Nepal. This is a follow-up report on that. It seems that in the end, the Nepalese regime has effectively collapsed. Today I will cover this topic in detail. On September 6th, the Nepalese communist government blocked 26 social media platforms, including YouTube and Facebook, sparking public outrage. The government said it aimed to fight fake news and hate speech, but the public saw it as a move to silence criticism. Protests erupted in Kathmandu and other areas, with casualties from police violence. In particular, young people and students took the lead in the fight, and the situation spread nationwide. The issue was that Nepalese police used live ammunition, causing casualties. Protests then spread nationwide. The government lifted the social networking service ban, but distrust remained. Afterward, more protests erupted, and demonstrations in Nepal have escalated rapidly. On September 9th, Prime Minister Sharma Ali, unable to withstand public sentiment, abruptly resigned. He was photographed quickly fleeing by helicopter, and the scene went viral nationwide, sparking anger and futility among citizens. The problem was that after the Prime Minister's sudden resignation, there was a complete lack of political leadership to restore order to the chaos. Additionally, 4 ministers in the Nepalese cabinet also resigned, taking responsibility for the situation, since there was no one left to handle the aftermath. Protesters grew more aggressive in the streets, and protests continued despite the Prime Minister stepping down. The protesters pushed through the police barricades and rushed toward the Parliament building. Soon, flames engulfed the Parliament building, followed by attacks on the Supreme Court and prosecutor's office. With videos of court records and case files burning, the country has become a lawless killing field. The police responded with tear gas and water cannons one after another, but it was not enough to control the large crowds that had gathered. The situation worsened, with state ministers reportedly beaten by protesting mobs, right? Protesters surrounded and beat the finance minister as he tried to escape, with the incident filmed. The justice minister was also assaulted by a crowd on the street. The protests are increasingly escalating beyond simple anti-government slogans, turning into violence directly targeting the political elite. President Ram Chandra Paudel's residence was also attacked, with flames from the presidential home symbolizing Nepal's collapsing national authority. Even more shocking incidents followed. The protesters attacked former Prime Minister Jalanath Kanal's residence, and during the incident, a horrifying act occurred where Kanal's wife was locked inside the house while it was set on fire. Ultimately, former Prime Minister Kanal's wife died in the fire. As tragic incidents persisted, people stopped viewing it as a temporary street protest. Neither the Prime Minister's resignation nor the government's decision to lift the social networking service ban could extinguish the anger. Instead, people believed it was time to overthrow the corrupt system and join the protests more actively. The actions of the younger generation were especially noticeable. Not only college students, but even students in school uniforms joined the protests, and they stood at the forefront of the fight against state power. There have been 24 cases of politicians' homes attacked and set on fire, with such attacks increasing nationwide. At times, shocking news was reported. Protesters attacked Kaski prison in Pokhara, Gandaki province, Nepal, destroying part of the building and reportedly allowing about 900 inmates to escape. The attacks on prisons happened not just at Kaski prison, but also at Kailali prison in western Nepal and Lalitpur prison in central Nepal, where arson also occurred. As protests in Nepal turned violent, the military eventually intervened directly. After an emergency meeting on September 9th, military authorities deployed troops to Kathmandu and other major cities. That evening, armored vehicles and military trucks entered the city center, and armed soldiers were stationed at key government offices, intersections, and the parliament. Among the citizens, there was a growing sense of anxiety that the situation had entered a new phase the moment the military was deployed. The Nepalese military urged protesters to show restraint, warning that some groups were exploiting the unrest and threatening civilians and government properties. The military said this wasn't meant to ignore the people's voices, but to prevent more chaos and loss of innocent lives. Still, citizens were skeptical of this explanation. Scenes of military forces in the streets seemed to show authorities trying to suppress public sentiment by force. At the same time, Mayor Kathmandu also posted on social media to calm the situation. He said, "This country is in your hands." He pleaded with the protesters, saying, "Please go home. You must make your voices heard in a peaceful way." However, citizens reacted cynically to the message to go home, with some angrily noting that soldiers and politicians stay home while demanding sacrifices from others. The number of casualties also increased rapidly. So far, more than 20 people have been confirmed dead, and the number of injured has exceeded 500. ERs were packed with patients suffering gunshot wounds, burns, and tear gas injuries, overwhelming medical staff with the constant patient flow. Local media reported blood-stained stretchers arriving at hospitals repeatedly, increasing citizens' fear. There were expectations that the deployment of the military would calm the protests, but in reality, the tension only escalated further. In many places on the streets, soldiers and protesters are facing off against each other in a tense standoff, and there is a sense of crisis that another clash could erupt at any moment. Nepal is now moving beyond simple protests, with the entire nation falling into a state of extreme tension as the military and the people confront each other. It seems that Nepal is becoming unstable once again. For now, the communist regime in Nepal has effectively lost all its power and has collapsed. Nepal has faced political instability before. The monarchy ended in 2008 when Nepal became a republic. Nepal has faced major political instability, having 14 governments in 17 years. Not a single government was able to complete its 5-year term before handing over power. In fact, Nepal is a country with much more political instability than people might think. Several coups and uprisings occurred, and a civil war began in the late 1990s. There was some hope that things would finally settle down and stability would return starting in 2008, but that hope turned out to be in vain. Nepalese politics became known for incompetence and corruption. Prime Minister Saima Sharma Oli's political career also symbolizes Nepal's chronic instability. Chronic political instability has deterred foreign investment and slowed economic growth, forcing millions of Nepalese youths to seek jobs in Korea, Malaysia, and the Middle East. According to World Bank statistics, it has been reported that about 2,000 young people leave every day for the Middle East or Southeast Asia to find jobs. With Nepal's communist regime collapse, will the opposition take power? It doesn't seem likely. Among the opposition parties in Nepal, there's another Nepal Communist Party. There are one or two more, including a Maoist party and a Unified Socialist Party. Even if the communist regime falls, I think another Nepal Communist Party will likely take power. The Nepalese military is acting. On September 9th at 10 post-Merit AM local time, the army began a security stabilization operation. They arrested 26 violent protesters, and the Nepalese army evacuated key officials after negotiations. It seems the military has taken power because the legislative, judicial, and executive branches are currently vacant. Protesters are defending legislative and judicial buildings, the prime minister has resigned, and ministers are being pursued by protesters. It seems only the military can handle this situation now. We'll have to wait and see what happens. The Nepalese military announced that the emergency deployment of troops to the city center on September 9th was officially for the purpose of maintaining public order. Military authorities said the measure was necessary for public safety and protecting government property, but controversy grows locally and among academics over whether it's for order or signals a possible coup. Some articles are already reporting that the military has seized power. The legislative and judicial branches can't function due to protests and blockades, while the executive faces a power vacuum after the prime minister and several ministers resigned. Under these conditions, the military is practically the only institution capable of running the country, which is why there is speculation that the military might establish a temporary governing body, such as an emergency measures committee, under the pretext of maintaining public order. It is still unclear whether this committee will operate as a temporary body simply to restore order, or if it will develop into a long-term military regime that seizes power. Nepal's future may shift based on the military's decision in this situation. If the military uses emergency measures briefly before handing power to civilians via early elections, chaos may ease. But if they seek long-term control, Nepal risks returning to military rule. What are your views on Nepal's situation? Do you expect political stability? Share your thoughts below. That's all for this video. Thank you.